All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Just giving everybody a minute to get your audio up and running. Thanks so much for being here for our second special BFU session of this afternoon on our final day of the National Bike Summit. I'm really happy to have you all here to talk about making the case for campus improvements with data. Now, just a couple of housekeeping notes for those of you watching live on Zoom. We are recording this session and we will post it in the Whova app, the conference app and website afterwards, and it will also live on YouTube for posterity, so you'll be welcome to share it and rewatch it afterwards. All the attendees should be muted, but you're more than welcome to put any questions in the Zoom chat at any time. And the second half of the session will be interactive, so we hope you will come off mute when the time comes to have conversation together. The closed captions function is on, so you're welcome to hide the subtitles if you don't want them, or make sure you can see them if you do. And I encourage everybody to put your name and pronouns and where you're coming from, your school name or your community name or organization name in your Zoom name box. And once again, thank you to the sponsors of the National Bike Summit for making today's session possible, including EcoCounter. We are so grateful to you for your ongoing support and partnership. So today's session is called Making the Case for Campus Improvements with Data, and we have three really awesome speakers that I'm excited for you all to hear from. Olivia White from EcoCounter, Sarbeswar Praharaj from the Knowledge Exchange for Resilience at Arizona State University, and Patrick Valandra from the Tempe Bicycle Action Group. So a great mix of practitioners, advocates, and academics, and I'm really excited for the presentation. And before I hand it over to Olivia, I just want to put in one quick plug for something we do in partnership with EcoCounter every year. This is the third year we're doing this, which is the Bikes Count Data Competition. So this is a competition we've done the last couple of years where any entity that collects data but struggles with what to do with that data, how to analyze it, how to turn it into storytelling or data visualization, this competition is for you. So the way you apply, we've got an online application that will ask you some questions about your data and your goals with your data, and then it'll have you upload up to 5 data sets that you have. So this can be manual counts, this can be traffic light counts, this can be volunteer counters on bike racks or traffic counts. This could be EcoCounter data. This could be any other kind of platform of automated data. Whatever you've got, bike share, any number of bike data. We'll pick a winner together. The League and EcoCounter will work together to choose one winner. And then over the summer, EcoCounter will work with that winner to create data visualization and storytelling using their data. So it's a really cool opportunity. I'll put the link in the chat if you're interested in applying to our blog post about it, and the deadline to apply is May 4th. So I encourage everybody who's on this call to think about what kind of data you have and how you could make better use of it, potentially by partnering up with us at EcoCounter. So that is my plug, and with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over to Olivia. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Amelia. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can we all see this?
Yep, looks great.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Amelia. I am looking forward to reviewing all those applications for the Bikes Count Data Competition. And yeah, it would be great if there were some people from some of the universities that we work with or who are doing data collection on their own to submit their data. It's been really cool to do the visualization over the past couple of years. So looking forward to that. Today, I'll be talking about some of the different options for data collection on campus in terms of monitoring cycling ridership, that sort of thing. A little bit about EcoCounter if you haven't heard of us before. So we are people who design and manufacture bicycle and pedestrian counting systems. We work a lot with different planners, engineers, advocacy groups who are interested in collecting data about how many people are walking and biking in their communities. And this is all in an effort to kind of promote the idea that using data is a great way to have evidence-based planning decisions made for walking and biking. So why why do we want to collect data on campus? There's lots of different reasons why we are looking into this and why this is kind of a growing field of interest. We can use bike count data for a lot of things, but bike data in general for informing the infrastructure needs on a campus. Campuses are kind of special spaces, and that they're it's a controlled space and defined. So having count data can really illustrate how people are moving around the campus. There are other efforts in terms of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions on campus, or supporting safe streets efforts, that sort of thing, where the bike count data can play a role in that. I'll be talking about a couple different types of bicycle data that can be collected, not necessarily just the automated counters today. So looking at bike parking and doing manual counts and that sort of thing as well. So the different types of bike data that can be collected, we have our permanent automated counters, which is kind of the bread and butter of EcoCounter. But there's also different types of data that we can collect outside of that or related to it, such as the dockless bike share data, bike storage use, the mobile versus permanent counters, again, the volunteer manual accounts. These are all tools in the toolkit that we can use to do data collection on campus. Another important part of collecting data on campus is that the campus is a microcosm within a community, and data sharing that happens within the community that a campus exists in is a really cool thing. So often the city or the regional government will be interested in seeing what specifically is happening on campus and how trips can, like how to integrate trip data from outside of the campus into the campus and what's happening once people get onto the campus. So there's always this potential for data sharing with local agencies. The counts on campus can also help to inform the needs outside of it as well, in terms of bike parking and other infrastructure needs. So I'll start talking about just some of the different examples of bike data that can be collected. I'll start with the first one that's probably the most simple and I would say low resource way to do bike counts. And that's the manual counts. This is a really awesome thing to do on campus because you can get students involved in doing it. It's a very interactive thing. It's very active, and there's a level of community engagement that goes along with it. But it's often something that happens before automated counters are introduced onto a campus to kind of figure out where is the best spot to put some of those counters and start that effort if it's a mobile or a permanent count program that you're looking to build. The manual counts can be done in obviously a really wide array of locations, but it's just a matter of finding the people who are interested in helping out with this, and having what's really great is when you can do multiple counts year after year in the same location and see a level of growth. In some areas, it's always good to note things like the weather, if that's something that's going to affect the counts in the day that you're doing them, the time of day that you're doing the counts, if it's the off-peak hours in between classes, that sort of thing. But yeah, the best advice I can give for this is to be consistent and have continuous counts happening every year at the same locations. You can also combine these counts. So the manual counts that are being done with survey data, so qualitative data. This can be observational about how people are riding, helmet use, that sort of thing. But it can also be kind of larger. You can do interviews with people who are biking on campus to understand more of their cyclist needs and what their perception of cycling is on the campus. So this is another tool that you can use. That's, again, it's not really the automated counting part, but it can lead to using automated counters in the future. I would also say the surveys are really good for informing master plans on campus. Again, it's just great to have feedback from people who are walking and riding on campus every day. So it's a good thing to integrate into that. I wanted to put this in. This is just cool bike parking that is available on campus, and it shows just the level of ridership at some of these schools. So doing bike parking counts is another manual way that you can do bike data collection. This is, again, something cool to do year after year to see level of growth or areas where there is a need for more bike parking. Again, very low resource way to understand cycling on campus. Not a lot of money involved. It's more just organizing people to help go out and do that research. And again, same thing with consistency, doing it every year and being able to compare the year after year counts for these things. For automated counters, this is, another one of the tools. It's not the be all end all of doing counts on campus, but it is a good thing, especially if you're looking to do counts for longer periods of time. So for the mobile counters, the advantage with that is that you can put those counters out at multiple places on the campus, and you can get data for maybe 2 weeks or 2 months or 6 months at a certain site, and then move the counter to another area. The picture we see here is an installation of tubes. So this is very, very basic type of mobile counter for bikes. It can be used on street or on multi-use pathways. And it's the type of counter that will give you these 24-hour counts. The data can be transmitted automatically, or you can go to collect the data yourself. These types of counters are good for areas where there's like a bottleneck in a space, so where you have entrances and exits, and you can understand the inbound and outbound counts with these types of counters. The installation for these are it's pretty quick to do. It's usually under an hour to install these tube counters. You can also do automated counters that are permanent, but I always recommend it's good to do mobile counts beforehand to figure out what's the best spot to put those permanent counters. Patrick's going to talk a little bit more about placement of permanent counters and decision making to do with that in his presentation. So I'll let him talk more about that. And another cool part of doing the installation of the automated counters is that a lot of students who are thinking of working in transportation planning and engineering will eventually use that type of data in their work. So getting them trained on how to use some of these automated counters and looking at the data while they're still in school is a cool element of using that type of data. This is just an example from a university in Canada, in Winnipeg. They did a really cool study on winter bike retention in Winnipeg. This is very much a winter city in Canada. There's a ton of snow. It gets very, very cold in the winter. But as a campus, they still managed to have a pretty commendable amount of people biking to campus in the winter. So they used automated counters at specific entrance and exit points to the campus to understand, in conjunction with the city of Winnipeg, how people were getting to campus in the winter time, and use that to compare against kind of seasonal bike ridership in the summer as well. Another thing I wanted to touch on was just, again, this idea that the bike counts that happen on campus it's cool to look at them in the larger community. So this was in Charlottesville. We were looking at some bike count data from one of the counters, and it was showing what happens when students do return to campus. We always think of summertime as being kind of the peak time of year for cyclist counts in a lot of spaces. But when we look at campus counts, it's often actually like the peak is going to happen right when the students come back to campus in the fall. So this was one of the examples, was having a look at one of the counters near campus in Charlottesville and seeing that rise as soon as some students came back in September and October. And lastly, I didn't talk too much about this, but communicating the counts is really, really important. So whatever type of data that you're collecting, putting it together in really nice, easy to share infographics is like the kind of cherry on top of doing all of the data collection, all of the work that goes into it. This is like what Amelia was talking about at the beginning of the session. We want to help people to do the storytelling. We want to help people with the visualization of the data. So this is, once you've done all the work of going out in the field and getting those counts done, putting together something that's easy to share is a great way to spread the news about the data that's been collected, and people are interested in that kind of interactive element of the data. So that's it for me. I'll stop sharing now, and I think Patrick is next up.
Sarbeswar, do you want to go next, or do you want me to go next?
Sure, I can go real quick.
Okay, mine's fast, so if we run a little bit long, I can speed through a little bit.
Sure. Can you all see my screen? Perfect. Well, so just to take it forward from Olivia, I am based within the Arizona State University Knowledge Exchange for Resilience, which is a university-wide interdisciplinary group of faculties and students and external communities. We're working together to build data-driven understandings of how the community functions and what can we do to enhance resilience. And many of you know, but again, to re-emphasize, Arizona State University has a significant investment on sustainability. And so what we are talking here is really looking at how campus and universities can play as a role model in advancing sustainability solutions for the community. And that reflects in its consistent placement in the top rankings on sustainability agenda. So it's very unique is that ASU is located at the heart of the city of Tempe in the Phoenix metropolitan region. And it's essentially a part of the central business district, driving the knowledge, the economy, and activities that come along in the central business area. So it's really integral to the sustainability and economy of the city. This central area of the city of Tempe, where ASU sits, is also one of the areas that are experiencing significant increase in employment, and that is largely because how ASU functions and how it works as an anchor in bringing together industries and really innovative and creative enterprises. And you can see what we are projecting based on the various approvals and the building permits and what has been already committed. You'd see that some of the areas within this campus and adjoining are going to be experiencing nearly doubling in terms of the numbers of employment in the campus and surrounding community.
Sorry,
and so that's
are these census? Are those grids census blocks?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So this is from the MAG, the Maricopa Association of Governments projection.
Thank you.
So with these changes that you are seeing in the central area of the city, there is also tremendous pressure on the environment and the ecology of the region. And so this downtown area, you'll see that in terms of the land use general plan, I sit on the community working group of this general plan that has been revised for 2050. And you'd see that much of the open spaces are being squeezed with the intensity of developments, and you can see the mixed use is increasing in the community, whereas the vacant spaces, the breathing spaces are somewhat constrained and challenged. And so that is really a key motivation for us to understand how the center of the city where ASU sits, which is also a critical component of the city itself, how could we really understand the behavior of students and faculties and people who interact with the university day to day? And so, and with that understanding, how could we innovate with new improvements in the campus that could enhance the sustainability and health of the community. And also, as I said, enhance the connections with the city. It's a very central point of the city. So how could we also enhance connections with the city itself? So this is kind of the motivations and the background to what we are doing today. Not today, for the last 3-4 years with EcoCounter. So we really worked with EcoCounter to set up 2 counting locations where, so you are talking about automated counters. And so we have this, so this is here the center of the university, and we have placed those counters on very strategic locations because of the light rail connectivity here on Apache, and then of course the University Drive, which is a key regional connector. And so these 2 locations are really the points where a lot of students and faculties commute into the university and then interact with the rest of the city. So we have been collecting data for over the last 4 years to really understand the trajectory and trends and behavior of these bicyclists and who really goes through this area. And what did we learn? And that's very important, right? Because what we learn can then be used to inform decision-making and campus improvements, which is the key theme of this session. And so you'll see that since January 2019, we have tracked these counts, the bike counts on these locations. What you see is very interesting. 2019, biking activity was booming in this location. A lot of people were using biking as a mode and preferring those and coming into the city. Whereas in 2020 with the COVID, you could easily predict a lot of the people were out of the campus and campus was shut down mode, and it really went down and flattened. But we were expecting that in 2021, when the campus was again flowing, and 2022, that it would go up, if not surpass the 2019 levels, it would at least go somewhere close. But you'll see this green and this orange lines in 2021 and 2022. In fact, 2022, we saw a dip in number of biking activities compared to 2021. And this is to a certain extent surprising to us, but also very valuable in terms of what we know about who are coming, what modes they're using. And again, 2023, the numbers are even going down farther than 2022. So this is a tremendous sense of knowledge that we have been able to gain with this longitudinal data to understand what is the trajectory. And of course, you can see the different months, because summer is when the campus is mostly closed, and then fall, a lot of students, it's a booming season with the students. But essentially, it gives us a great understanding of the trends and trajectory of biking. And of course, you can see the building blocks with this data, right? 2019, again, a lot of activities, and you can see how the buildings are really coming down, and really into 2021 and 22, the same logic. You could see that the activities are growing up. We are positive about it, but it's yet to be seen how this unfolds in this year and going ahead. And this data is really useful because it is automated. It gives us real-time data. We can also break down the data into days of week. So really weekdays versus weekends. We can understand the various hours. And so we can understand the peak hours versus the lean hours. When does the students and faculties prefer to move in? And that has a lot of repercussions in terms of parking, one-way, two-way traffics, really regulating the flow of traffic and working with stakeholders to really advance some of the sustainability agenda that we're talking about. And it's, again, very interesting. You can see Tuesdays and Thursdays are the 2 days where you see peak biking activity in compared to, and of course, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, it goes down. Many of the classes are closed on Fridays, and Saturday, Sunday, of course, the university, very few activities. So it's really, you can really break down the data and understand the trends by day and hours, which is also very useful. And what I also love is the real timeness, right? We have this dashboard through this EcoCounter, which is really nice in a way that you could visualize and communicate in simpler ways. What is the bike activity in compared to previous month or previous year or previous days? So really the students, faculties, and community can understand and easily communicate with each other what can we really understand, and what could we do with this kind of data in really is awareness, a lot of awareness in the community. So what can we infer from these data sets that I just shown you? So longitudinal data, we saw daily trends, weekly trends. And so it's clear that the value of location-based, so you've seen 2 locations and automated data. And so we don't have to worry much. The center is there, the data is streamed, and so we can easily sit back and make a sense of what is happening in terms of bike activity. And of course, the longitudinal data, as we could demonstrate, that we can really understand the trends of going down and up. And so that is really critical for policy decision-making processes. And also, of course, the parking and transit, which is a critical department within ASU, which manages all the parking lots and all the these bike lanes and things like that. And of course, the city council itself was very interested in working with the university. So really the stakeholders can use this data and insights to educate people, to make them aware, and of course for campus improvement. So a lot of positives from this data. But last slide, I want to also make you think about what did we learn and what we didn't learn from this data, right? And so we are really motivated to understand these are the 2 locations where we're collecting the data, but the campus itself is so large, you can see on the screen. And we have several of these bike counters and bike parking, bike valleys. And so can we really extrapolate? Can we really say that this trend that we see in these 2 locations are generic, and we can say that across the campus, the trend is going down? Or if we want to say for the entire city, what does it mean for one location data? Can we really generalize a theory or an assumption based on this? That's a critical area that we're concerned about. The other is also, what are the other ways that we can collect micromobility data to link with this information, which is very useful to support policymaking? Because we are talking about the demographic aspects of the bike users, right? We are talking about different modes, not just about the bike, but various other types of mobility has come up, like the skateboards. The students are really in these days are trendy. They're using the skateboards, they're using the electric scooters, and we are not sure whether this station is collecting segregated data. Probably not, and there might be opportunities around this, which could be really interesting to understand this breakdown by the modes to advance some of those tailored policies. And of course, what actions can we take? So data is very useful, insightful, right? It gives us knowledge, but how we can really use this to really regain the confidence of the bike users. You saw that bike numbers went down, right? So the question is, what others are doing, other universities, other actors and cities, what can we do collectively to really gain the confidence? And is there incentives? Is there other ways? So we're really interested in knowing and exploring and collaborating on this area going ahead. Thank you. I'll stop share and hand it over to Patrick.
Thank you, Sarbeswar, for doing that. Let me get my slides up. So Olivia and Sarbeswar talked about the kind of the data side of it, and I kind of want to talk about what we do with the data once we get it, and even what we do before we even decide to gather data, right? So we want to talk about just what we want to collect, right? Do we really want to collect the number of bikes going over a counter, or do we want to improve the quality of these routes? And if we do that, what data types do we need? What are the drivers of that data? What do we want to measure for each area? And then we'll cover, what's the university's role? How does ASU feel about this in terms of overall attitude, and then in terms of integrated transit into the university and the surrounding community. So first off, quality versus quantity, right? So quality is aspirational. It's what we want to build to attract a thing. So in our case, obviously, we want active transportation. the quantity is going to trail. Those are going to be the wheels going over the counters that tell us if we're doing a good job in our quality. And then we want to decide before we collect the data points that are going to tell us if we're successful, right? So let's cut into that. So this is College Avenue, south of the university, going into one of the bike counters. If you look at this street, I would say as a cycling advocate, I wouldn't add a thing to this street, right? It's low speed. It is tree lined. It is through a residential area. There's plenty of bike lane, clearly delineated markings. There's some medians in the middle with that tree got taken out, but there's trees in the medians. This is just a quality street for cycling to the university. And I just wanted to use that as an example of kind of what we want to build to attract riders. And as I said, this goes right into the counter that we have. So there's a number of data points that we can collect. A lot of us just really think about collecting, like I said, wheels over a counter, right? So that'll give us the number, our ins and outs, if we're collecting both directions. It may miss some bikes or scooters if they're going over the counter, simply because of the square footage of the sensor placement, right? Then there's mobile data, right? There's several companies out there that you can get mobile data from, and we can use that to maybe get some sex or gender information, race, and race is primarily from census tract. So we know the income of census tract, and we know the races of those census tracts, and we can kind of do some inference there. Income levels are very similar. Manual counts, I know Olivia mentioned earlier, they can give you bike type, ins and outs, gender, but we might want to start looking at the number of electric bikes or folding bikes or bike types that are going through that give us an indication of that particular community that's using the bike lanes. Heat maps are great. Sarbeswar and I looked at some Strava maps from I think it was Sydney, that showed a real interesting delineation in route preference between males and females. And so that can be helpful into looking at issues around the quality of the bike lanes or the quality of the bike routes. And of course, we got crowdsource. Everybody knows Twitter, social media, and I don't know if you've heard of it, but bikemax.org is great. And then there's some open data that we can get from the Census Bureau and health departments that kind of round out what we're looking for in terms of figuring out which data we want to collect for the things we want to build. And here's just another table format of that, right? So riderships, we've got counter automated, we got our wearables in there. This will be up online after we're done, so you can look at it a little bit later. But I just wanted to point out the difference between the traditional data and the emerging data, right? So you think of traditional data and you look at these types, you know they're going to be slower, right? Where emerging data, social media is right now, crowdsourced data you can fine tune to have the crowd collect the exact data you want to get versus combing through a police report or a hospital report or insurance data to find what you want. And so I just wanted to point that out in this slide. All right, so here's our counter location at College, south of the university. It's great, right? Our counter is in this green little section here next to the bollard, but we've got open sidewalks on either side, and it's bi-directional with cars going counterflow. So again, this is phenomenal, right? We get thousands of bikes a week through this location. And we have noticed that the the counts have gone down here. And we wanted to understand why that is. So, I just took a big look back at the picture and said, the green here on this little map is our counter locations. The pink is the new streetcar going by. That's the streetcar route. It's very local. The red is our light rail line going through town. Blue is roughly ASU's campus up through the sports stadiums at the top of the picture. And then the yellow from 18 to today is where all the new building went. So on the far right, the largest yellow box is thousands of new student condos or condo units, mostly students live there. The smaller yellow box at the bottom is newer ASU housing that's being built for students, specifically around like Barrett Honors College, which has 7,000 kids crossing that street every day. And then we've got some smaller apartments going in the middle of this picture here in the yellow. And both counters have seen some decrease. And my guess is that if I look at and it's not my guess, I've looked at the census data and I know that to the south, that group is getting older and they are retiring. So that was a heavily used corridor for our college professors to come into campus. Many of them live south of the university and use that route. And I've been to their retirement parties. So I know they're not riding into campus anymore. To the north for our Forest Avenue location, for 3 years, the street that you would use to cross on that was shut down due to all the construction going on there. So we also know that will affect the route that people choose to come in on. And so back to our drivers of data, are we really measuring wheels across the sensor? And does that mean we're safe? And does 1,000 trips a day mean everybody has access? And I think we can probably say no to both. So we have to really identify what we're trying to do, right? Here's another look at campus. This is to the east where a lot of that new building has been constructed, and those green arrows are pointing to a street called Lemon. We're going to put a mobile counter up here at Lemon to gather some data. But the yellow is the Barrett Honors College. Again, I said 7,000 students crossing a day there. Just above it is Biodesign, which is a major employment hub. And then in this area of the green arrows has been a massive increase in student and apartment housing. And this has happened since we put the counters up, and we've seen decreased crossing at our counters. And so the reason I wanted to measure Lemon is Apache here at the very bottom where this horizontal red line is, has light rail, it's got heavy traffic, and there's not a ton of student housings just directly south of it. But with all this student housing and just anecdotally knowing that people are crossing at Lemon, I want to get a better idea of what that street's being used for. So I know this is a quality crossing not because there's infrastructure there, but because there's housing, because there's restaurant and shopping opportunities. And those are the kind of things that we want to also look at when we're building these active transportation corridors or structures. All right. So if we were to, go through this and just figure out what do we want to do as an objective for a quality measure, we want to say, bike and transit. This is just an example, right? And this is a real one for ASU. Bike and transit infrastructures are integrated onto the campus, right? And so if we envision that, we can now get some data to see how we're doing, right? And so an example of that data or a key result for that would be the connecting streets are low speed. Yes, right? College is 25 miles an hour. Apache is 35 miles an hour. Do we have infrastructure that connects closely? Well, yeah, we got streetcar coming in right at that street with a stop. We have a bus line right there next to the streetcar that stops for the local shuttle bus. And then about 120 feet around the corner is the intercampus shuttles for Arizona State University that runs to our West and Polytechnic campuses. So yeah, we've got those things, and we can measure those with objective data. And then is there adjacent business access? Well, yes. Just to the south of this, there's a nice bar and restaurant at the Graduate Hotel. There's within a quarter mile, there's probably 20 or 30 restaurants and small bodegas that students and others can use. So we do have some access to business next to it. And then of course our density in housing is increasing rapidly along this area. And so these are all data points that would suggest that our efforts to build infrastructure are working. I don't know if my computer froze up here. There we go. And so kind of takes us on to, what's our vision? What do we want to do as a university? What do we want to do as universities? And what do we want to do as individuals, right? So this is ASU's charter, right? ASU is a comprehensive public research university measured not by whom it excludes, but by whom it includes and how they succeed. We advance research and discovery of public value and assume fundamental responsibility for the economic, social, cultural, and overall health of the communities. That's a pretty good charter for the biking community, right? We could throw some bike lingo in there, and that's powerful. That's what we want to do, right? We don't want bike lanes in the road. We want this. And so I thought I'd have to include that in here. All right. And then in closing, so, I think universities and colleges are unique because of where we sit in the communities. We can do a lot of things and force the hand of cities just by the force of our economic power. Public universities, I think doubly so, because ASU is a land grant university. And so we have a duty to give back to the community and improve it around us. When we talk about what we want to do, we don't want to argue the data. We want to frame our proposals at a higher persuasion level. I was talking a half hour before this conversation with a friend of mine back in Tempe, and he's like, yeah, we shouldn't even talk about bike lanes. We should just say, this is a campaign for safer dogs. Like, we're going to make the dogs safer. No dogs are going to die if we build this. And nobody will argue that unless they hate dogs, right? We need to predefine what our success looks like using the observation and key results. And then when we make these campus improvements, we need to look at them from outside the campus, public access, how they impact the humans that use them, and then really use these for economic optimization, because that's kind of what the universities are for, right? Yes, they are teaching institutions, but there is no doubt that they are economic drivers. So that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, all three of you. Great presentations. Really appreciate it. And I have to admit, when we were putting this session together, I was really fascinated by the problem of what do you do when your data shows that ridership is going down? Because so often we say, build it and they will come, count it to make your case. And we sort of assume it's an easy story to tell to make your case. But what if your counters are showing that year after year, you know, the data is going the opposite direction that you want it to. So we've got about 15 minutes for discussion, and I welcome questions from the audience. And I realized during our last session that the chat was super robust, which was awesome for people attending live, but for the purposes of the recording, none of that was getting captured. So I encourage people to come off mute and turn on your video just for the sake of the recording later, since we will be posting this. So wish that had occurred to me in the last session, but just wanted to say it now. Jeffrey, I see you have your hand raised, so go ahead. I'll start with you.
Yeah, so first off, I saved the chat from our last one because I thought it was such a good discussion, so I got you there. But so I actually do have that kind of question. Like, do we think that this is a true like slump in ridership, or are these mode shifts? You know, at UC Davis, we do statistical surveys with our Institute of Transportation Studies, and so we've actually seen, while bicycling has slipped in the recent years, actually a lot of that has moved to bus trips. So we're still getting active modes. Do you think some of that kind of new trolley or those kind of different corridors are shifting kind of your demand there in Tempe?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you measure like transit ridership to kind of be able to measure that growth and kind of like,
yes.
Is it apples to apples, or is there a gap, and are we losing people to SOVs?
So we've been trying to work with our parking and transportation division to get some of these data, and they've traditionally done a poor job of collecting. So we're working with MAG and the Transit Authority to try and get some idea of like what does light rail traffic look like, right? We know there's a lot of students on it, but we don't know how many. And the same thing with the streetcar, which connects to the light rail, but augments it into the downtown community. One of the positive things I think we did is it was obvious that streetcar wasn't going to pay for itself, and we said, well, screw it, make it free, right? Like if it's not going to pay for itself, just whatever, right? You already dumped the billions. You might as well make it free, right? If we know we're not going to recoup, just make it a public cost and go for it. And they did. So it's streetcar is free.
Just to add to what Patrick said, you know, what I have been experiencing with this data, because I've been taking to people to understand why this is happening, and since 2019 and today. So there are some reasons that are, you know, in terms of technologies and infrastructure, and then some which are beyond the control. So let me talk, briefly allude to both. So one is technologies and infrastructure. So what you are saying is absolutely right. A lot of the traffic has shifted to electric scooters and skateboards. Mm-hmm. And also there are bike sharing. There are at least 4 or 5 vendors which has come up in the just last 2 years. So when I'm looking at 2019, those options were probably not there for the kids. So a lot of that has a recent phenomenon, right? And so that's that we are experiencing. And the ASU Parking and Transit Services has this kind of the same feeling, because they have these bike docks and bike counters, and they have cameras and things like that. Although the data is not so much accessible or open, but in terms of my discussions with them, it's been a kind of a common feeling that the modes have shifted. And the other is, you know, which is beyond the control of the university in a way. You have seen how the urban heat is increasing in Phoenix. And you have the summer months have been expanded to almost 8 months now, which used to be about 5 to 6 months. Each year, you're having the number of summer days above 100 degrees, above 90 degrees. And so that is also a significant challenge, because biking happens on the road and people are exposed. And so, you know, some of that is outside the control of the university, because that goes into the city's domain, whether, you know, how much trees they could plant, and they have their own urban forestry program. And so it's a combination of both, I believe, that some are in control, you know, which you could understand, but some are outside the controllable factors of the university.
Tim, I see you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a few questions. One with the data chart that Sarbeswar, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, shared showing the downturn. Was that just based on ground automated counters that or were maybe location based? Was it also for the Tempe campus, or was it for some other location, or was it across all of the campuses that Arizona State has?
No, so that's two locations. It's completely location based. Patrick was showing one image where you saw the counter.
Yeah.
There are two counters, and so that this data is essentially from those counters. It's an aggregated number from the two counters. That is what our question is when we move forward in doing this business and understanding this further. Is does this data means representative of the entire campus community? Probably not. Probably not, because what you're seeing Patrick telling is that land use has shifted. So probably we need more of these counters, but it's very difficult once you instill these counters. It's very hard as an infrastructural challenge to move this location to another location. Probably there could be new locations that you have to install, but then that's again, it's about funding. It's about convincing the university that if I talk about a new location, how that would help them as an university to plan better in terms of transit and parking. And so that's completely location based. And I also saw your chat message. It's very useful that you talked about Streetlight. So I have had subsequent meetings with Streetlight, and they have very powerful data. Although they changed their methodology mid last year in terms of how they collect data, but it's very useful. What they're doing is they're giving us knowledge of also not just the counts, but the demographies, right? The race, ethnicity. They're matching this data and overlaying with some of the census statistics. But then much of it is, again, proprietary. You have to subscribe to their model. There is an annual fee, or they have this model where each street it will be counted, so you can actually draw a particular area, and then they will give you a assessment of how much it would cost. It is kind of very complicated and expensive from the university's perspective. What we're looking at is a solution that is affordable, that is generalizable, and that is easily communicable. And I think that is where we're kind of looking at, looking ahead into the future.
Yeah, that gets to my other question about how much Streetlight data and Strava Metro have been used. And I got a Strava Metro account early in the pandemic, and I was just blown away by the amount of data I get and how easy it is to look at. It's one of the best big data tools I've run across, because it actually is really, really easy to use. And as a nonprofit, we were able to get an account for free. I'm not sure what it'd be for universities, but I was very impressed. And now it's not everyone. Like Streetlight data is more like everyone, but the quality of the data in Strava Metro is quite good. And it's a pretty big sampling it's a really big population base in the Silicon Valley area. And people, bike commuters as well as recreational cyclists, are all using it. Like I use it every day. In fact, the heat map to my house, you can tell where I live by looking at the Strava heat map. And I've got so many bike trips because I do everything by bike.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was curious. I really would like to hear if anyone else uses Streetlight data, because I have not looked at it myself. Early in the pandemic, I saw a talk that they gave with their data, and I wasn't that impressed with the data that they were showing me compared to what I was doing with Strava Metro. But their algorithms can change, and they can get better at analyzing what they're seeing. So I was just curious how many other people, if anyone else had been doing Streetlight data at all in our set, that people here, or Strava Metro even. I'm happy to show people Strava Metro, although I have to get a release to show it outside of my organization.
Yeah, I'll jump in to say, the League has talked to both of those organizations because, we want to make sure people have all the data resources available. And Olivia and I, we've talked about, how do you extrapolate data? Because each of these sources sort of shows one piece of the puzzle, and, how do you sort of combine sources to tell the full story? And, how much do you need before you feel like you really have the full story? And that can include the manual accounts with all of the, sort of demographic data that, potentially none of the automated things can really fully capture. And even, manual accounts can get those things wrong too. So I think it is a really interesting question, and yeah, definitely welcome thoughts if anybody has used any of those tools.
I've done a lot of manual accounts, and they frustrate me to no end because they're very time intensive, and it's very the continuous data I'm getting from Strava Metro is much more satisfying, and I can draw out boundaries where I want to look at stuff and analyze directions and demographics. It gives me a much better picture of what's happening on the street than doing the manual counts is a pain in the butt. And it's very spotty data, and it depends on the quality of the person you have counting also. It's very problematic. Oh, one other thing I'll say before I hang up here a little, don't I hang up, but just stop talking, is when you do the recording, if you export it, the chats are saved with the recording side by side. So all the chat stuff is there.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I know. And we'll make the chat available, but I just didn't want people to have to, go through and look at two sources at the same time. This is a much more interesting video to watch, to have the conversation all happen live. Jeff, go ahead. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I put this comment in the chat, but in the faith of getting the video as accurate as possible, a good relationship with your MPO and consultants can also get you a lot of access to this data. So we use Fair and Peers as our on-staff consultant at UC Davis, and they have access to big data vendors. I don't believe they use Streetlight. They actually use a company I can't recall the name of, but our MPO uses Streetlight, and we can ask them questions and they'll do exports for us. They'll give us the information when we're curious about it. So just know all the places that you can collaborate, and there's so much data out there in the world.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point about, this Sarbeswar's bread and butter is integrating those different data points into something that approaches knowledge, right? And so you can have all these different data sources, but if you have trouble integrating them and visualizing them together, it's harder to get a good picture, and it's harder to tell a story, right?
And also, what our motivations were is that this 4 years of data and investment and partnership with EcoControl was really productive. And so it is also important to verify and validate some of these data. And this is particularly important from a scientific standpoint as well. And that's why the partnership with Streetlight, we have been talking for over a year now, and very close to also setting up something. But essentially, what will happen is that their data is really broken down and segregated quite a lot. I went into their platform and played around a little bit. So they give bidirectional data. So when you're trying to validate this counter, which counts, just the passing numbers in and out, and you are trying to then validate that with the data which is AI and machine learning based, which uses the mobile phones and how people move around the city. They're often not relatable in a sense that there is a computational challenge in terms of tallying these two data sets. Yeah. So we are conscious of this issue of different ways of collecting data, and whether we can or cannot compare those to make sense, but I'm sure there is potential to look at these different kinds of data and overlaying. And there was also a question about Strava Metro. I have been talking to them quite for some time. Strava Metro is very interesting. So I worked with Strava Metro data back in Sydney. Patrick was mentioning that I spent 6 years there. It's pretty interesting that when I reached out from here, they said the Strava Metro is mostly accessible to the city government people. If I belong from a transportation department or a city agency, so their platform is open and accessible to people who directly work in the city to make changes and improvements to the city landscape. Whereas in the university, sitting in the research center, that was not accessible. But I would like to hear from others, and probably this is a good opportunity to collaborate with you, Tim, in terms of accessing that and probably collaborating way forward.
So have you applied for an account in Strava Metro just as a nonprofit to the university?
I did, and we were reverted saying that did we have a direct role in the city transportation? So they're looking at, are we using this data for direct city road improvements? That was not, because this is starting as a research venture where we're starting to understand. We cannot straight away imply that we'll be going and changing the alignment of the road. That's probably down the 2-3 years, probably a long-term vision, you know.
Interesting. They may have changed their criteria. When I applied, it was right when they first offered it. And they said it was free for nonprofits, and we knew the product manager because he was local. And so we got an account. So I can look at everything in my area, which is really nice.
It's who you know.
Yeah.
Silicon Valley connections coming in handy. Cool. So I hate to do this, but we are at time for this session. I wanted to give our speakers one last chance. If you all have any sort of closing remarks you'd like to say, Olivia, Patrick, or Sarbeswar, go ahead.
Yeah, it was a great discussion. Thanks everyone for being here. I guess we're closing out the summit. This is the last presentation of the day.
Yeah,
So
the last
it's been-
virtual thing. Yeah.
The last virtual thing, yeah, I guess. But yeah, thanks for attending, and had a great time meeting all of you in person, and thanks for everyone for contributing to the chat discussion.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I will say that if you are, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to
Go
say,
ahead.
you know, on behalf of Tempe, ASU, and the Tempe Bicycle Action Group, we really appreciate the opportunity to come forward and to talk about what we're trying to do, and, you know, just make these connections with other bikey people, because I think that's kind of what it takes for this thing to grow.
Yeah, no, echoing Olivia and Patrick, you know, in the sense that the universities, you know, we are, you know, situated in a very unique landscape, and always looking ahead and looking out for partnerships and collaborations. And so really appreciate this platform to share what we are doing. And of course, the road ahead is complicated, but, you know, we'll continue to knock on the door. We'll look for these partnerships and relationships to support sustainability, which is key to the university's growth and development. Thank you.
Thank you. Great comments. I appreciate all of that. And thank you so much to our speakers. Thanks, attendees. I put the link in the chat one more time in case you joined late, just to plug our data competition that we do with EcoCounter every year. And the application is currently open. If you have data and you don't know what to do with it, this is the competition for you, where one winner will get free consulting and data visualization and storytelling from EcoCounter. So click that link, it'll take you to our blog, which will take you to the very brief Google form that we have as an application for that competition. Open now through May 4th. Thank you again so much for being here. If you are in Washington, D.C. at 3 o'clock, there will be a congressional briefing on improving truck safety for bicyclists. So large, like semi-truck style trucks, and a very important issue. So if you're near Capitol Hill, try to get there by 3. I know that's 12 minutes away, so totally understand if that's not doable. But the congressional reception is at 5 o'clock, also on Capitol Hill in the Senate building, Russell building. So hope to see any of you who are here in DC for the summit there in person. Looking forward to celebrating the closing of the 2023 National Bike Summit with you there. And if you're joining us virtually, thank you so much for being here today, and look forward to connecting with you more online in the future. All right, thanks everybody. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.